Good morning and welcome back to another Fireside chat where we are continuing our theme of the AI-powered modern workplace. Today we're going to hear from our prestige panel of IT leaders, along with, for the second time, our special guest, Paula Costa, who joins us for Microsoft. So again, thank you for joining us again today, Paula. So listen, thank you everyone for joining us. This will be the last show before the summer, while we all have some much needed breaks and spend time with our kids or whatever else we're doing over the summer. Last month, we spent some time talking about Microsoft 365 CoPilot, what it is, how it's potentially going to transform the workplace across almost every role, and what organizations need to do to prepare for that. So we'll put a link up for any of you that missed that. But today we're going to shift gears slightly, and we're going to talk to the audience more around AI in a broader sense, the impact that AI is going to make, already making in the workplace, and really how it's going to affect, improve, enhance, transform, change almost every single sector in which we work. I think there's no doubt that we're right on the cusp of this fundamental change, from everything from academia to construction, legal, finance, and of course technology. So hopefully this should be a really interesting show today. Before I start, I'd like to say hello to the panel. Ask you all just to introduce yourselves for those that are new to the show, and then we'll kick off with the first question. So I'm going to go around the table. Paula, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So Paula Costa, work for Microsoft, and I lead the modern work and AI-driven productivity area for the partner ecosystem that supports our customers.
Fantastic. Madassa, what are you next?
Yeah, hi, my name is Madassa. I'm the CIO for Waverton Investment Management. I'm very interested in exploring AI as we speak. As you can appreciate, there's a lot of benefits that we can really utilize within our ecosystem.
Great, welcome again. Kevin?
Hello there, my name's Kevin Woodcock. I'm the IC Strategic Lead for the East Riding Roads Council.
Thank you. Jazz?
I'm Jazz Bassey. I'm Head of Solution Delivery for a law-led professional service company called Gateley.
Thank you. Alex?
Alex Taylor. I'm the Group IT Director for AWIN Global.
And last but not least, Ken. Hi.
Hi, I'm Ken Dickey. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Leathwaite Executive Search.
Fantastic. So look, we're not going to talk about what AI is, although it will mean different things to different people. But I think we are going to kick off the panel discussion today with just, and Madassa, I'm going to point to you first. But how do you see AI, shaping the future of your industry?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's quite an interesting area. We've always been advocate of technology within the business. The last 3 years has really evolved as part of our transformation program, moving far more into the cloud. And we now have a internal drive to put AI at the forefront. So I've kind of kept that momentum flowing within our business and just trying to gauge what opportunities that we may have. So I think initially, the key areas, without a doubt, it's with the obvious, it's the increased efficiency and productivity. I think AI can obviously introduce far more automated tasks and identify patterns that perhaps we run through on a daily basis, or shall we say mundane tasks, and then potentially make predictions. I think there is this aspect of freeing up human work so that they can focus a lot more on creative and strategic tasks. So I think without tools such as AI, I think it's very much a mundane approach. So increased efficiency and productivity is one of the key areas we feel that can very much enhance experiences within our business. And I think improved customer service and experience. We are a wealth manager, and client service is key to our success and driving AUM within our business. So looking at how AI can be used to personalize customer interaction potentially. Although we're a discretionary house, we make decisions on behalf of our clients. There are potential opportunities where we could probably introduce AI to have real-time interactions with our clients via their dedicated portals that we have implemented. and potentially anticipate customer needs through those portals. And again, it's increasing that interaction and hopefully lead to better customer satisfaction and loyalty. But as our clients have obviously observed over the last 3 years, our tech transformation has been at the forefront. So I think there's an expectation now from our business and not just our clients to keep this drive and momentum going forward.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, and Jazz, I guess from your perspective, right, thinking about customer service, some of the decisions that need to be made, the amount of data that kind of gets processed. Do you share a similar view to Madassa, or have you got anything specific with regards to the legal sector you think that's going to be very different around what AI can or can't do?
Well, there's obviously a specific challenge. Well, there's a number of challenges around data and sharing client data with some of the tools available now that are providing the AGI and generative AI capabilities. So there's obviously that challenge, but it's also in the provision of advice. So that advice has got to be human-led from a legal perspective. So we need to make sure that we're supporting the business in being efficient, in leveraging the benefits that AI brings, but also understanding the challenges it brings in how we share data, how we provision service, also the challenges it brings from a security perspective as well. So we've set up a committee internally that's got people from our IT functions, our operational parts of the business, our DPO, to make sure we're taking a considered approach there. But we're also trying to understand beyond what's generally out there, what we can do to leverage some of the capabilities. So we're looking at exploring how we go about creating our own co-pilots, for example, internally. So that's something I think we're keen to kick off with our solution engineering team fairly quickly now, to try and leverage some of that benefit and how we interrogate our data within either Azure, OpenAI, or somewhere else to get some real business benefit out of that.
No, it's really interesting, and if we look beyond, I guess it's a good point you touched on there. So we've got kind of AI products, right? So obviously last month we talked about CoPilot as within 365 in particular, but Paula, you touched on last time about how some of the services around Azure and others are enabling organizations to build their own copilots and AI. And I think Kevin, as we pass to you, I think there's a really interesting point about that. And I remember one of the slides that we talked about last time was about that kind of autopilot versus copilot. And I think, Jazz, you made some really good points there around it's all about, I'm sort of interpreting what you said, but it's about not necessarily doing things for us, but it's about providing better insights and better information to enable us to make more human-powered decisions faster, right? Which I guess is really key. And Kevin, if I look at East Ridings, then of course, you've got a hugely diverse population, right? That you serve as a council. Where do you see that kind of efficiency in driving, better human contact through AI rather than necessarily providing the things that a lot of people hate around just automated services and self-service? Do you see a difference between those two?
I think to be fair, there's quite a lot of different areas where the potential is. I mean, you just got to use any local government website and you'll know it's quite a minefield to actually navigate and actually get through. And whilst we can put bots and things on the front of that, again, it's content which is generated by an individual, where if your content on your website, for instance, is actually in a format which can actually be consumed by bots which actually understand language, you're in a much better position going forward. So I think what will happen is the drive, as most organisations, especially local authorities, is to actually, of those who can save themselves online, to encourage that as much as possible, which then allows us to actually support those who can't. So it's not about being a digital only, digital first, and this type of technology really sort of moves that on the next step, because it actually makes that information easier to find. I also was in a meeting this morning and learned that we're doing some work with our planning colleagues, the planning applications. So we've been using AI recently to actually process planning applications, but one of the contexts is it doesn't understand the actual language that's being used. So therefore, there may be an application going through for a roof, but actually within the description, it doesn't actually state it's for a roof, but it's clear from the application and it's clear the context of the language that it is for a roof. So they're looking at using ChatGPT in that sort of arena. So I think a lot of this it's a bit of an unknown, isn't it? This is all new technology. It's just out there. Councils, unitary authority, 650 plus services, 300 odd systems. There are many, many opportunities where this can be used to actually create them efficiencies, but just as important, improve the information we provide to our residents.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some really good points there as well around, I think, the clearly the excitement, right? I think, some of the areas you touched on are potentially game changing, right? You're talking about already looking at limitations from the language models that are out there, right, in understanding the specific context of your organization. And then of course we're moving back to Jazz's point around, whether that's building your own CoPilot or actually building and training your own language models to understand, the remit of your organization and kind of how that works. Do you find there's quite a lot of excitement across East Ridings around the potential of AI? Do they kind of see this as the next best thing, or is it a bit like, oh, AI will fix everything, therefore we don't have to, or is it actually, do you know what, we really need to start understanding what we can do better? I think
there is a. I was at our chief executive's conference last week, and it was really interesting because the chief exec actually gave a short speech on a particular subject, and then at the end of it said, "I got that from ChatGPT." So therefore, there is that understanding at that higher level regarding the potential change of this. I don't think there is a long way to go on this journey, to use management speak, because it is us understanding as an organisation how we can adopt this. And I'll be honest with you, there's a long way to go on that. And we just started to look at policies, looking at content, accuracy of information, etc. Because without the foundations, well, AI will only pull back what it can actually retrieve.
Yeah, and again, that's an interesting point, and we touched on some of this last month around CoPilot, of actually, the amount of work involved quite often in the organisation to get the best out of these services, right? And we talked a lot about having the right data and the right processes and just having the right content in the right places so that we can start to leverage these things. Because today these things typically still sit with people. We all know what it's like in the summer holidays. I'm experiencing some of this myself over the last couple of weeks, where I've got members of my team and members of other teams on leave, and it's incredible how difficult some things become because it's individuals that retain that information or know where certain things are stored. And I think as we start thinking about where AI is going to help us, right, it's almost that kind of prophecy of, well, AI will fix all this stuff, like we won't have to worry. But in actual fact, there's a huge amount of work to be done just to map out, what we've got and how those people work and how those processes work. So if you start thinking about, where, is there low hanging fruit, I guess, right? So are there areas within your industries where you think AI is going to make a really quick impact? And then where are those areas where you think there's a lot of digging, a lot of exploration to be done, lots of getting people involved? Alex, what's your take on?
I think the quick wins for us is what you just touched on, is the potential ability for things like CoPilot to surface the vast amounts of information we have inside our business, but that won't necessarily be structured or categorized or organized in an efficient way that allows users to find it now. How can we go from having a user raise a ticket about how to do X when the information on how to do X is already published several times, or we've answered that same question 100 times? That's not to take the user element away from it, because some people might be new to the business or might not know where to go and find it. But we have a vast amount of information stored across SharePoint, emails, PowerPoints, all that stuff. And what I'm seeing at the moment is people are actually wanting to use the meeting recap function in Teams. And I'm having people not necessarily know that's potentially there in Teams, and actually finding third-party AIs and wanting to suddenly hook up our data to that and not realizing the potential impact of that. So I think the quick wins are as soon as Microsoft can release CoPilot for Office in a manner that, you know, can be tested or the tires can be kicked. Because my other fear is that actually from all the sizzle videos that are put out there, it makes people very excited, but then actually the reality might be a little less, and it will take time for the real stuff to kind of kick in and the real improvement to see. So there's an element of, you know, risk that we jump in with both feet, and actually, you know, the water's not as nice as we first thought it would be, and that can have an impact on the business thinking, you know, well, we want to invest more time and effort into this. Further on from our business, I think there's a lot of partnership. Well, we work with an incredible amount of publishers and advertisers, and I think what we want to see is how AI can be used to connect those businesses together as well. You know, how can we connect people? How can we surface information to clients and partners that want to find that out as well? How can we make our platform that users interact with better from completing it with, you know, partner profiles and what have you that can be auto-generated? But you still need to have that human element of curation in there as well. You know, we can't just assume that it's going to be 100% accurate. So there's definite quick wins, but I think on the longer term, it's going to need a little bit more time and investment to make sure that where, as the others have mentioned, that the compliance is there, the security is there, that the data boundaries are there as well. So it's an exciting time, but I'm looking forward to CoPilot coming out for Office for sure.
Yeah, I think you and everyone, and Ken, we've had a few chats, and I know you've been you were on our show last month, and I know you've been looking at kind of other technologies and other areas where AI can be used to connect the way your teams work, right?
Yeah, so we're a bit like Adassa, we're quite a way along the journey, and when management's big, the issue we have is that I think it's a little bit like the early internet. There is so much promise, but is it going to underdeliver? And then there is the other part where actually, if you do kind of take all that promise and deliver it, what are the ramifications for doing so? So I mean, I've heard everybody here talking on the panel talking about how it can improve productivity. It can make people be front and center. We can talk about how we can improve the experience. But there is a flip side to all of that. You know, we employ people at lower levels. Part of the toil that they go through is part of the learning experience. You know, if you're a junior associate in a law firm, part of cutting your teeth is actually going through this effort of finding the information. We could be looking at how we not only kind of improve on the experience of individuals, but we could be taking away from individuals. And that actually is something that industries have got to reshape, and it's happening at a pace which a lot of industries can't cope with. So it's all well and good if you're a relatively small firm with 10 developers and you're embracing code writing through ChatGPT or whatever it is. But then if you're a large organization that have 350 developers sat in a building somewhere, and have you just made them all obsolete? Can you find the work to move those people into roles? And I think one of what my industry is very concerned about is how we get into responsible AI. So do not get me wrong. I think this is fascinating. I'm so looking forward to CoPilot coming along because, you know, I see the toil in my own departments, my own teams, my colleagues. You know, they could be doing so much more effective human work. And instead they're spending time trying to collate pitch documents and trying to, you know, manage their diaries and everything else that we can talk to about Office. But there is that flip side to it, which is if we make it so that you don't have to do the research. You don't need 15 people. You don't need teams that work collaboratively. You just type a question into a source. And the flip side to all, again, and it's been mentioned by pretty much every single panel member, how do you ensure the authenticity of what you're getting back? You know, and these are, in my industry, it's so particular. We're talking about human beings. We are talking about expertise, human capabilities. You know, we can't rely on AI hallucinations that says CIO X is this awesome human being, and you don't have any way of evidencing that. And so there's still a long way to go with how we utilize this tech. I mean, I think this is something that it's there. I've heard the panel members talk about security. I've seen some really interesting pieces about how the large language models can be based in your own environment, totally yours. again, I'm very curious because, and Alex made a really good point here. Lots of sizzle reels. We haven't kicked the wheels. I've actually had to kick the wheels on some other LLMs which sit in my own environment. I have control over. I can lock down. The whole concept of not being able to find the word roof, because it wouldn't recognize, again, isn't an issue because it's all my data, my information. And so some of these challenges that people are relating to are very specific at first, but we've got to understand this is a really, really large topic that is, and no respect to Paula because she's here today, it's not just Microsoft, and obviously there are solutions across the board. And this is where I feel Microsoft really have got a real opportunity here. CoPilot could really be revolutionary. And we, I think, as a panel, would actively embrace it for all the things that it talks to, that assistive, I love the way it's called CoPilot. It's assistive, it's not replacing people. But there is still that whole piece where if we make it so efficient and make everybody so efficient, do we need so many people? And there are, it's funny how Kevin mentioned his CEO talked about ChatGPT. That CEO doesn't understand the tech, but knows, wait a minute, this can get rid of 90% of the toil. And what that means for some people will mean something very different to others, right? So in my industry, we're embracing it wholeheartedly, but there is a real ethics and sort of responsibility piece to this that we should all be considering as well.
Well, yeah, and I think some of the security stuff is really interesting, and I think I've spoken to a couple of customers over the last couple of weeks around this topic, and from everything from why do we need use CoPilot as an example? Why do we need that? It's going to cost us money presumably at some point. There's all these things you've got to do. Rob, you spoke last time about some of the preparation work we need to do. Well, I can just go and paste this stuff into Google or ChatGPT or whatever I decide to do, and that of course opens up its own challenges, right? About the fact that whilst we do need to have a safe playground for and I love that that sizzle point about we need to be able to take what sizzle and turn it into real and see see what we can do, right? Can it boil the ocean? Is it a fad? Where's it going to work? But we've also got this quite scary scenario, I think, approaching, which goes back to that kind of governance and security around, are people just taking corporate data already and going, actually, let's just see what these third-party tools do without necessarily giving any cause or concern about where that data is going, and I think, we spoke last time a lot about, the way in which, for example, CoPilot is going to operate within your own tenancy, right? So, Microsoft aren't going to use your data to train its models, etc. But, there is a big risk, right, of if we're not using these technologies ourselves, will other employees just take that data and not really think about the ramifications of it?
I've got a quick anecdote that can talk to that in my industry. I'm not going to mention company names or anything like that, but it's well known that one of the firms have had to take their staff and warn them that it's a dismissible offence to use public-facing AIs with what is very sensitive, personally identifiable data in those platforms. Because the story goes that an associate was using an AI to build out candidate profiles, which is obviously scraping versus things like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It also put information into the system that then was presented to someone else who recognized it, and that's how they were discovered. I'm questioning how much of that is urban myth, but I actually do know the company, and I do know that is the rules that they have adopted. And I think it's fascinating that the penny's dropped. It's like, well, who else is doing this? How do we check for it? How do we secure against it? Do you ban ChatGPT because we have no controls over it? But at the same time, it's making my associates far more productive. And it's counterintuitive that you want to take something away that could also be really useful. Yeah. But there is the inherent risk, certainly around personal information, is phenomenal. And again, that going back to your point about getting the experience of playing with CoPilot, using our own data, I think it's really key to all of the people that are sitting on this panel, getting that real sense of what does it mean for security, because it's going to be probably one of the defining features for most people's usage.
Yeah, I think you're right. I talk about anecdotal cases. I was listening to a story the other day about in the legal industry in the US, where they had, I forget what the case was now, but it was quite interesting. But they were trying to, the defence had given evidence based on a couple of different cases where someone had got let off for some particular thing, and they cited these examples where it happened. And one of the cases when they actually got asked to go into details and present on it, they were asked where did the information came from. They couldn't find it in the in their databases. And it was like, well, I asked ChatGPT for it, and it went and told me all about this stuff. And this was a real example of this kind of AI hallucination kind of approach. And there was no evidence to suggest that this case that was used in an example was real. And I think, we do face that point of, and we did touch on this last time about, who is in control. And to that point of CoPilot, I like, right? Because it's all about, just because in the same way you could search for something online and you could find, anything about anybody online, you've got to take anything you're presented with a pinch of salt. And I think we come back to thinking about data and where things are created. And I had a client just yesterday say to me, so, at the moment it's great because people will write stuff, and we've got people that aren't particularly great at writing, right? They know their stuff and they'll write something, but they're not used to writing for a different audience or etc. So they see tools like CoPilot as being fantastic to kind of make something a bit more presentable or more concise or more to the point or more fun or whatever it might be. And then the question came back, but then what happens when everyone stops creating content? And therefore there is no content for it to actually summarize. You're just asking these tools to go and create content, and it's creating content based on content it's already created, which it might have summarized. And it kind of went into this real kind of loop about.
I'm going to jump in here a little bit, though. This is where we have to be really careful about the AIs we talk about, from generative AI to the whole point of that word. If you teach the AI what the English language, literature and everything is, and then tell it to create, it is creative. It will create. This is the other part when you get into the ethics, the responsible AI piece, because generative, as that term means, not automations, not kind of using your own data and querying it and running a knowledge base. But when you get into the realms of, and again, products I've seen, there are really quite scary things coming along where my own partner, my own wife, she's creative, but I watched a video I saw an AI create a video from scratch with just some keywords. There was it created the storyboards, it created all the animations, it created the drawing. It did this in the blink of an eye. Now, if you're a creative working at a design studio or in a marketing company or an ad firm, you would go, but I had 10 people in my team who wanted a Photoshop, one worked with this and one did that, and I had the creative, and we all worked as a team. Now that person just asks the generative AI, I want a video of X and Y. I want the other example they gave. I want a corgi. You can look up this image on the internet. I want a corgi wearing yellow sunglasses and a hat riding a bike in Times Square. And it creates it, and it's photorealistic. And then they edit actually, I don't like the glasses. Can you change the shape? It's the creative piece, which you're talking to there, is actually kind of the thing that we probably should be fearing a little bit more as well, because it will do the creative piece. And again, the issue you have then is who learns and how do you teach your junior staff to ask the right questions? And I think that's where the nuance in this AI comes from. And this is, again, where, without kind of laboring the point about why I think CoPilot's great and versus the threats from other types of AI, is that that is the creative piece that really does bring some challenges for us as leaders in industries, because it has the possibilities for being really revolutionary, but it has massive implications for what do you know is real. We've all seen the Pope wearing Balenciaga, for example, right? What is real? And it's not hallucinations then, that is somebody has actively, whether you call it deep fakes, whether you call it de-aging in a movie, whatever you want to call it, the new title sequence to the latest Marvel TV show, it wasn't hand-drawn, it wasn't painted, it was created by AI. You've got to bear this in mind, that there's lots of facets to this.
Yeah, I think you build on a really good point, and it's probably worth opening this up to the rest of the audience from a point of view of because there are major concerns, right? And you touch on that, for every benefit, there's obviously a counter concern, and I think this almost goes across anything. But I think it's just the pace of this is just so vast now. I think it's almost like 6 months ago, 8 months ago now, July, we didn't have ChatGPT, right? And now you've literally got every day there's another website with 1,000 websites that you can go and create, you know, the best story, the best graphics, the best deep fake, the best whatever. And so this is becoming more and more in the public eye. And, you know, I'm seeing less fear now, but I think some of the points that you touched on have a massive impact for more entry level roles, right? And I think this isn't necessarily about, you know, so therefore you've got that kind of, as you say, yeah, where do people come up through the ranks? Where do they gain that experience? Where do they know? Where is that knowledge? I mean, does anyone else want to kind of chip in there from a kind of view?
I mean, we ran a Microsoft workshop early this week, and we actually gathered our investment managers, and I actually had my COO and my CEO join. To Ken's point, and some of the other colleagues, they get very excited about the concepts. In fact, he walked out the door and he put forward a suggestion that whoever puts forward the best efficiency gain idea from AI will win a bottle of champagne. I mean, it's great initiative just to send out to the groups that were present. He gets the idea, and then I bumped into him yesterday, and he said to me, "Great workshop. It's quite mind-boggling. How are we going to deliver it?" So I think it's quite an interesting topic for many that we're seeing within the business. And the reason I had to hold this workshop was so that those that are coming across the term AI, generative AI, and that are actually going out and becoming shadow ITs with certain other tools, is trying to bring them all together and actually tell them, look, guys, CoPilot is coming. The purpose of CoPilot is to bring our ecosystem together. I think there was a topic that we touched on earlier. Data is going to be key to the successful output in some use cases. So if you're using a third-party platform where your data resides in another cloud vendor, then you can't actually go and type in a search term that points to a Word document on your network, because the best way to combine two documents together is using a / at SharePoint site or a Word document. So there are certain criteria and baselines that we need to establish prior to jumping into the possible use cases. So it's creating the fundamentals and moving a shift towards a ecosystem within the CoPilot environment and your SharePoint and OneDrive. I think it's then setting expectations and creating boundaries. So there were some suggestions around creating, you know, cheat sheets when it becomes available, and policies naturally that enables us to set some guidelines and strict guidance around where and how you can use CoPilot and what you shouldn't use it for, because there is this concern that once CoPilot is available to our end users, it could get quite messy fairly easy in terms of how they use it. So it's actually creating that boundary and setting those expectations at the outset. So the planning for the next 6 months is going to be key for us. I think it's establishing a timeline. I mean, I was reading on one of the slides that there's an expectation that it will become available in December 23. I mean, Paula, you may probably know better. But I mean, when I say 23, again, it might be a high level, estimation. But you know, we've got to start preparing now and setting the ground rules and policies should be created fairly soon.
I think it's also that kind of the expectation that there is work to do in order to get it, you know, working best within your organization, and therefore that, you know, the benefit of what it can deliver versus the amount of work involved. And you could argue a lot of the work involved you should be doing anyway, right? You should have a good data governance policy, you should have good security, you should have good policies. And I think we'll see a lot of organizations use this as a reason to get those things in line, because there's now, you know, a bigger prize at the end, right, for getting data in a good place. I think, you know, and Paula, I welcome your views on this from you know, some of the exposure you've had on the early access programs as well. But one of the things I think you raised last time was about, you know, who gets a CoPilot, right? Is this something that everyone gets? I mean, we don't know what pricing is going to be, but you know, my opinion is it's going to cost money, right? And it's probably not going to be £1. It's going to cost. So who gets a CoPilot, right? And then to the point of what I think you've all touched on today, those that don't get one, are they severely disadvantaged, right, by not getting it? And therefore, are they going to be the ones that actually end up breaching or trying to breach your data governance and security by, well, if I don't get one, I'll go and use my own. I'll go and use my own third party. So it opens quite an interesting debate, doesn't it, around where does it fit? Are there specific roles that we see being most relevant to this, or is it the most senior roles that, those organizations, those people don't have the time to go and do the mundane stuff, and rather than using, someone more junior in the team, they'll switch to AI. Kevin, what's your thoughts? Sorry, Paula.
I was just going to say, I think it touches on what Ken sort of came across earlier about how are the junior people going to start learning.
Yes.
So if you're giving CoPilot to the juniors, you are going to slow down that learning process, and you may impact that learning process. So then it's, how are you all thinking about who would get it? How do you ensure that the younger ones still get that learning journey? And at what stage would you start to bring in CoPilot? And is it even something where the senior people have CoPilot, but then the junior people have to go and check that for the accuracy and the data sources before it's shared wider? So I'd love to get.
But how do you then develop those senior people? Because they will slowly phase out of the business. In any sector that's delivering professional service or delivering advice, the most likely use case will be that first draft. So if that first draft is being done by technology, being done by AGI tools, then those junior people are not only are not undertaking that activity, they're not there to within the organisation to develop and do that second, third pass. So that's, I think, a concern for most organisations in that space, and I don't think there's an answer for anyone yet. Everyone's watching closely as to how those things develop. But I think there's been a number of other interesting points that people have been touching on. I mean, the piece around data. I mean, you're right, Rob. Everyone's looking at that, but it's not simply having a policy, it's having a DLP policy and ensuring that's communicated. You need the tools with a granular deployment around the various levels of what type of data goes where, how you share it, how you don't, because you can have that policy, you can tell people what to do, but undoubtedly people will find ways, not necessarily maliciously, but find ways of sharing data they shouldn't. So you not only need the policy, you need a way of implementing it. But a good point that Madassa made was about the innovation, because it's all making it very much more technology more accessible to everyone. So you are going to, with organizations taking a steer from Kaizen or the Toyota approach in the way everyone takes more of an active participation in being innovative, because everything's now becoming more accessible, because you're having conversation around ChatGPT and the various other AI tools with people that aren't technologists, people that are very interested in things that are coming down the wire, where you wouldn't have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think about some of the, the skills. We have some very clever people in all of our industries, right? But some of them are really poor at visualizing content, at creating PowerPoint decks, at summarizing stuff, putting stuff into short words. And I think that's where there's some real value, right, as you say. But the danger is, as you say, people will share content not purposely because they're trying to leak it, but because they're actually trying to improve the way they work. And they often see those tools, right? And we see shadow IT massively, right, where you just hear about what you hear about on the grapevine. You might pick up something on social media that someone's shouting about and go, wow, this is the next best thing. Because quite often the conversation, this kind of goes onto the preparation of stuff, which I want to ask you about, is how well is the organisation at an executive level, at a management level, talking about AI, right? So is your whole organisation aware, right, of, we think about, well, everyone knows what ChatGPT is. Well, I still speak to people that don't. I mean, I'm sure my parents are getting on a bit now, but I'm sure they don't know what it is, right? And they have jobs and they do things. So from the conversations you're having with your teams, and Justin, you talked about exec sessions, and so did you, Kev. Is this now board level, right? Is where this fits and how we do this? Is this right up there with security and governance and everything else?
Yes.
Yes.
I think everyone's nodding, everyone's saying yes, because it is one, the opportunities, but also it's disrupting the existing business model for most organizations. On going back to the same point again, Ken mentioned, and I covered there, how are you then can continue developing people and ensuring your organization survives? There's going to be some serious quick wins once this technology is accessible to the masses, but then how do you plan for the longer term?
I mean, my company's executive search, right? So we look to find the best talent for the top roles to move them around. But if there is no pipeline for that top talent, how do we even function as a business? Never mind internally, the product that we move around doesn't exist in the same way anymore. So how do you assess people? How do you work out now? Is my industry now going to be completely decimated? Well, no, because basically board members, chairmen, etc., when they're hiring a CEO, want to talk to a human being. So they still need an executive search professional. Well, how do they develop? And this is the downstream that hasn't really been thought about yet. You know, we're all looking at, and again, it's that optimism, over-promising, but actually, will it deliver? Because fundamentally, there's so many roadblocks to how this will impact in industries that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a revolution. It is going to be iterative. And to Jas's point, there'll be some quick wins. You will see maybe some of the offshoring that's been done before onshore because it's now affordable to bring that talent and the thinking back into the country, which is brilliant. You know, there are certain things there where we're looking at our own people. I know that's pretty selfish, but just, you know, there are things that you could be looking at here where you kind of retain talent as opposed to offshoring and trying to find a cheaper way of doing it. But fundamentally, it could also decimate pathways and career paths in a way that nobody's really thought about at this point. And we have a slightly different hat that we wear in the executive search world because we're looking at future pipelines, right? So we're looking at future leaders. Where do they come from if there is no pathway, right? And again,
well, they will once AI develops consciousness.
Yeah, that's the really scary one. We won't go there today.
Paula, can I ask a question back at you, if I may? And thank you, it was really insightful. Paula, obviously you work with lots of, you work with us, but you work with lots of partners, and you've been obviously, involved quite heavily in some of the developments of CoPilot and things across the board. Is there any? Have you kind of got any insights at a collective level that you're allowed to share about, what you're seeing from interest uptake, risk concern, communication across organisations? Is there anything you kind of wanted to share with the panel or ask the panel?
I think a lot of organisations are seeing particularly Microsoft 365 Copilot as that early entry into AI. It's, a lot of the security and all that is already built into that product, so it's an easier route to go down first off. And then on top of that, then they're thinking about that sort of persona mapping, the job role identity of, what roles will this really have an impact on productivity? So, is it those that are spending a lot of time, information workers, in documents, creating stuff? So, helping customers identify that. And then as well as the sort of, the obvious of, using the cloud workloads and document classification, they're really helping customers look at, employee liability, because somewhere along the line, employees will have to take ultimate responsibility for what AI produces. And is this something that needs to start being looked at as part of HR policies? Because CoPilot is exactly that. It's your co-pilot to help with those complex tasks, etc. But ultimately, you have full responsibility for what that output is. And if you, an example I give is a salesperson gets CoPilot to create an email, doesn't bother checking it, sends it to a customer. That quote is completely incorrect. Where does that liability lie? Is that the employee, or does the employee then start to blame AI? And I think these are really important things that employers need to start thinking about, and HR as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Anyone got any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I was just making that note a little bit earlier to hopefully mention. The other thing I'd like to ask or put out there is that we've been talking about how this is good or bad for business, but we all work in technology, we all work in IT. And one of the things that I need to start thinking about is, how does this impact my team? Ultimately, IT will be the gatekeepers to using these tools. And people are going to be looking at us to say, how does this work? How can you validate that this is correct? Where is the checks and balances? And ultimately, we will be the ones looking after that. So one of the things we've only seen at the moment is what it can do, but I think we need information on the IT side about how it actually works, and how we can answer those questions that would inevitably come up by HR, saying, well, okay, how can we validate that this document was created by CoPilot or was created by Alex Taylor? Where are the checks and balances there? And as you say, we're going to probably need to identify or highlight that this document or this draft was created by the use of AI, and have potentially the lower junior members doing those initial checks of those drafts that are created to add the stamp of the company flair, or however they want to write it. But I wouldn't say I'm concerned just yet, but there's not been much said about how IT will be able to manage this information, or how you roll out these AI bits and pieces. So that's one thing that I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for.
I'll just jump on the back of Alex's point there. I think that's a really interesting, if you look at how over time boards and executive committees have changed. So the C-suite used to be traditionally your CFO, your CEO, and a chief marketing officer or whatever. And then they started to expand. You had a CTO or a CIO. And then CISO was mentioned. And actually, I think you'll find that AI and the understanding that piece, because it touches so many aspects of business, and it's so critical to getting it right for everything, whether it's ethical, whether it's profit, whatever it is you're looking at, it's going to be a board seat. It's going to be an executive level role and led all the way through the business. As Paula said, it affects HR, it affects the governance, it affects compliance. Regulatory bodies are going to be all over this. It's going to be so important so quickly. It is going to be a very sort of integrated part of every business.
Ken, have you just created a CAIO role?
Yeah, I was thinking that, yeah.
I'll be looking to be one of the first advocates for that, yes.
It's definitely getting bigger and bigger, that list, isn't it? But no, I mean, I think really valid. And I think, I'm talking to a customer this afternoon, actually, about CoPilot. And, there's 3 people from HR on that panel, actually, because they are quite, they've never heard of it. They don't know what it is. They've not been involved. They've been dragged into these things. And it's really interesting, as you say, because, and it's not just about, you create content and how do you know where it's come from, but you haven't just got that CoPilot stuff to deal with, right? You've also got, as we touched on earlier, without the right controls and things in place and the right training and the right onboarding and the right awareness, then this stuff can go anywhere, right? And at the end of the day, most of these things are producing text, right, that people can copy and paste. I'm sure we've all done it, right? We've all written something, whether it's a poem, an email, firing, hiring, whatever it might be. I'm sure we've all used, a commercial ChatGPT consumer product to go and test something. Which I guess
it's a common theme when you go into organisations. They bring 3 members of HR in.
No, but I was quite interested by having a CoPilot discussion with a customer that I got this afternoon. So there's, someone from IT, there's somebody from operations, and then there's 3 people from HR, which I thought was really interesting. And it's very rare. I think it's probably the first time that we've gone into what essentially a lot of organizations will see as a technical thing, right? We are a technical enablement company. We do technology transformation and change and those things, but actually it's quite rare to get HR in something without you asking them to be in. So I was quite blown away, actually.
I think it goes to my earlier point, though. I think across organisations, people do feel it's more accessible. They may not have access to it in the office or through their work devices, but people are playing around at home. I find I'm talking to people outside of my workplace that don't work in IT or have never worked in IT, and probably more familiar than a number of people working in IT about some of these technologies.
Yeah. Well, totally. I think it's become the new information checker, isn't it? Rather than Googling something or whatever people would do before, where you're sifting through information. Again, this is the final bit of the challenge, I think, is if you throw something into ChatGPT, for example, then you you get a response. So rather than just a bunch of search results that you choose which one you're going to go through, you're getting a response from something which is very easy to take as gospel, isn't it? And I think the reason for HR's involvement in this particular one is around, they want to drive their own communication, right? So from their perspective, it's like, well, how are we telling the story about AI? AI is coming, it will affect your role at some point. We don't quite know how yet. This is the journey we're on. It's a new concept. You need to understand this stuff. We're going to invite you into these forums. You need to be aware. And this is kind of very much what they're actually asking for is, well, how will you as a partner in this situation, how will you help us have the conversation with our people, not IT, because we kind of trust IT will get on with that stuff, but actually, how do we drive it? Conscious of time, Paula, from I'm going to throw another question on you, if I may. Many of the organisations that obviously we work with and you work with, and a lot of the partners that you work with are in similar situations, right? So I think, like many, we can't wait to get our hands on CoPilot either, right? So we unfortunately don't have a magic button either. But from what you're seeing, where do you, what would be your top tips, right? Really for obviously for our panel, for anyone listening, and really for the role in which partners like ourselves and the other great partners that you work with can do to help organisations.
I would say probably the number one thing is getting that data hygiene done. It should be done anyway, but I think CoPilot will be far more effective if the data is stored in the right places, classified in the right way. Employees start to understand that you've got a window of opportunity here to start to get that prepped environment so that CoPilot will land really well in your organization, and your employees will reap the productivity gains.
And do you see this? Do you see, and I guess the question for all of you as well, do you see this accelerating? I know most of you are pretty cloud intense anyway, but do you see this accelerating migrations of more services and particularly data into cloud?
I think so, because I think from the initial videos we've seen, it's quite clear how CoPilot does rely on OneDrive and SharePoint. I've been speaking to partner companies within our group that use third-party data storage platforms, and I've suddenly realized that actually, in order for them to really benefit from using CoPilot and ask CoPilot to go and pick up these two documents and create a summary, it needs to be in your data center of Office 365. So they are suddenly deciding to make a gradual shift towards SharePoint and OneDrive, or at least begin that journey. I think one thing also just to touch on, I think what's very important, my marketing team were very, very eyes on the actual presentation when they were with us, because they were quite keen to ensure that when staff do start using CoPilot, that the output is in line with the company corporate templates.
Yeah.
So that's going to be quite an interesting area that I'm quite interested to see how you can use CoPilot or AI to then output the relevant summary into a company agenda, minute notes with the Waverton logo, for instance, with the corporate branding, with the color schemes. So that's going to be quite an interesting aspect alongside your data itself.
Yeah, and there you go. You just pulled in marketing into the whole conversation.
Yeah. And I think it is. I think certainly, and we'll see how the pace of this changes as the early access program expands and more people get access to this thing. But I think it's. Someone asked me the other day, like, surely you want to get on this program, and it does make you look at everything and say, I don't know, I'd rather. In some ways, I think it's good to wait, right? Everyone wants to test this stuff out, right? And I think it would be great to have an incubation base to play around with how it's going to work. But at the same point, I do agree with Paula. It's that you kind of want to get the best experience, right? To a couple of you mentioned it could be a real anticlimax, right? But actually, it's going to create based on your data, right? So it's a really good opportunity to clean up, right? And not just get stuff in cloud, but get rid of stuff as well. I think it's a really great opportunity to look at stuff you don't need or legally need to keep anymore, and I think it is about involving every part of the organisation on these pilots. I think, you know, we typically see IT are always the first, right? And obviously IT need to be involved because, you know, as you say, you've got to be able to govern it to extent, understand what's happening, look at where data's flowing and those things. But I think there are so many of those components. Marketing, I think, is going to be a huge, you know, Ken, to your point about creating imagery and those kind of things. How much time do marketing spend? My marketing team are probably listening to this. So how much time do they spend doing things that could be far easier if they had the right sets of templates and the right imagery, so that when you've got images being created by AI, they're at least in line with corporate policy. So really interesting. I think the other thing, of course, is regional. You know, I know many of you are global organizations as well, but, you know, how much is this going to help us not have to replicate content in multiple languages by just having these tools do these things for us? So I think it's really, really interesting space.
You missed one piece as well, which is inclusion. So the other part that this really does assist with is helping those less able, those people with different language abilities, neurodiverse, across the board. The AI opportunity there to make it more inclusive. If you embrace that early on, you could really be bringing in something really quite special for everybody as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. Thank you for that. I think that's really good. Fantastic. I think we're just about out of time, but this is, as always, we could have gone on for ages. But I don't know if anyone's got any last kind of comments or thoughts before we close. You know, I think we've covered a lot today. I think it's been interesting to again go over the key importance of data. I think all of you have resonated that's absolutely vital, and obviously linked to that is security. I think, you know, the tools of knowing what people are producing and how we're going to be able to audit and monitor, particularly in the early phases, what content is being produced by, we use CoPilot as the example, but being produced by CoPilot and how much of that's being changed. It'd be interesting to see what tooling exists to enable us to do those things. And I think it will be really interesting just to see what roles jump on this first, which ones really see the benefit. And I think we'll see, you know, I love that idea of the bottle of champagne, but I think, you know, you're gonna see loads of these great ideas, I think, of just, you know, business processes that can be simplified, ways in which we can create better content, ways in which we can educate and train people better. I think there's so much of this stuff. You know, I personally love the meeting recap stuff. I've been playing around with that myself. I think it brings that final point I was going to make around adoption and technology change is one of the things, and I think I touched on this last time, but one of the things that I've realized, if you haven't played around with the Teams meetings intelligent recap, it makes you change the way in which you work. So one of the things that I found and Alex, I welcome your view, but in using things like this is the way in which I talk in a meeting or my teams talk in a meeting. We often use the term we or they or could you, rather than necessarily naming people. And of course, when we're using these AI tools, we sometimes have to change the way in which we interface with this technology. And I think this is another area that organizations will need assistance with, right? In knowing, you know, how do you talk to it? We've all sat there on, you know, British Gas's website or something like that, trying to get through to someone, ask AI, you know, ask their chatbot a question. But I think we're going to have the same challenge with people. And how do you get the best out of generative AI? What's the way in which you ask the question? And I think that's going to be a really interesting point as well, because, you know, we're all relatively used to it. We'll practice it, we'll try it, but you could give this tool to somebody straight away and they could ask it a question and get a really random response back and almost give up. So
they could, but I think that could also depend on the generational divide as to how quickly they can get up to speed with these tools. I suspect if you put an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old in front of it, they will probably get it quicker than we probably could. It's just the nature of the beast. But that's also an opportunity to ensure that the existing staff that you've got are trained to operate these new tools. You know, the marketing professional, they might not be using their existing Adobe tools to create the image themselves, but they're having to interface with an AI to create and to tweak and to continually iterate on that. So it's a different set of skills that they're having to learn. And you're right, the way you interface with them and the way you ask the question will be key to unlocking the benefit of this. So I think there's definitely, yes, there probably will be some people that will unfortunately lose their roles once you get up to speed. But I think there's definitely positions available for people that know how to interface with these tools. And I think that's where a lot of the potential can be from that.
Fantastic. Listen, panel, thank you so much. We're going to stop here. We'll break for the summer, back in September. You never know. Some of us may have access to CoPilot by then, so we might be able to give some hands-on experience, right? So fingers crossed. Thank you very much. Enjoy the summer, and I'll see you all in September.
Thank you.
Thanks.